Okay. I think they're starting.
Okay. Is this on? No.
Oh God, you guys are stuck.
Is this on? Oh, okay, great. Thanks. All right, so welcome to Fear and Loathing in the election cycle of 2016. My name's Cynthia Nash. I'm representing the Lake-Sumter chapter of AFC, Association of Florida Colleges. This event is co-sponsored and co-hosted by the Lake-Sumter chapter of AFC, as well as the Lake-Sumter College Democrats. We also want to thank the Lake-Sumter Student Government Association, and a special welcome to our guests over here on the side. We've got the Lake County Democratic Party. You want to raise your hands? There you go. Okay. The Green Party of Lake County. All right. We have our our student Democrats, right? Okay. And then the empty tables, just so you know, we did invite Lake County Republican Party, Lake County Constitutional Party, and the Libertarian Party of Lake County, but they haven't shown up.
They believe in free and small government.
Right. Okay. So there is food over there if you hadn't seen it yet. And our main event is going to involve Mr. Jeremy Norton and the microphone right over here. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce Mr. Professor Jeremy Norton to come and get the show on the road. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. And thank you for the AFC for having me and hosting this event. Election time can bring, excitement. It can bring energy, especially for, people like me. It can also bring hope for the future. But I'm not thinking you guys are feeling that right now. Hence the title of this event, right? It's bringing a bit of trepidation, fear, and loathing. This one does seem different. I share your feelings. The best bumper sticker I've seen recently, it was sort of on the back. It was a picture of a bumper sticker, mind you. It said, "Giant Meteor 2016, let's get this thing over with." So I think that encapsulates the mood that a lot of people are feeling, that fear and that loathing. We have had a lengthy, brutal, continuous process so far. And folks, we still got about 2 weeks left. We're not done yet.
13 days.
13 days. But with the end so near, it's important for us to see the value of our role in the political system. Not only of your votes for the high-profile office of president, which kind of sucks most of the air out of the room if you had noticed, but of our opinions and positions as citizens. Elections are about us, not them. As many of you know, I am biased. For example, I root for the Florida Gators. Absolutely. Now, I have other biases, right? I have opinions in positions that I believe in. But that's not the point here. I'm not here to tell you what to think or to convince you to see things my way. My overwhelming bias, the one I'm proud of, is that of education, in the promotion of civic responsibility, civic engagement. I see your value in our republic. I want to empower you. My students hear a lot of this. When we look at our choices on the ballot this year, and we have many, it can be confusing. The confusion is natural, and unfortunately, it's sometimes intentional. I want to challenge all of you to find clarity. Clarity in your convictions, clarity in your understanding of the choices we have, and a clear understanding of your value in the process. Our republic requires, as Thomas Jefferson said, a well-informed citizenry to function at its best. You know what you believe, what you think government should and should not do, and what policy priorities should exist. You are more complex than a soundbite. Your positions may not align directly with the political party, and there is quite a bit of variance within the political parties themselves and of the candidates that represent them. Though political parties are a good way to organize ideas, to organize campaigns, and I want you to ask them, I wish the others had come too, about their positions and how that lines up and coordinates with your positions, your values, your issues. Because the United States is a representative republic. We elect individuals to make political decisions for us at the national and state level. This election gives you the opportunity, as we do every 2 years, to elect your representative in Congress, as well as one of Florida's senators. At the state level, depending upon where you live, you will be selecting your state level representative and, depending upon where you live, your senator to represent you in Tallahassee. There's a lot more to it than the presidential election. Now, we have heard a lot about the presidential candidates. They've been unavoidable. But do you know what the positions of these so-called down ballot candidates are? What do these office seekers represent? Have you looked into them? I challenge you to go beyond the yard signs and look into their positions and vote your interests, your values, your priorities. Your vote counts. We know from recent history that your vote for president in the state of Florida counts more than in most states. This year is no exception. That is important. We are a battleground for the national candidates. That's why we're getting so much time and attention from them, if you've noticed. Know this, though. Your vote counts even more for state and especially local offices. We have the opportunity and the power to elect officials at the county, city, and district level. These offices get practically no headlines, but have a much larger impact on your daily lives than you may realize. Right? Your city council counts. All those other positions, we've seen them. How many of you have seen your ballots so far? Yeah, so we know the top line, and there's all these other people in column 2 and 3 and 4, right? We can look into this. We can find alignments. Your vote also has much more power in these races than anything national or statewide. Dig into these candidates and their backgrounds, positions, and motivations. You can even ask them questions. They are much more accessible. They probably even want to hear from you because they realize that they're also ignored. If you don't vote your interests locally, only focusing on the top of the ticket, you are giving power to those who do vote and are informed. Unlike the races already mentioned, where we send a representative, we also have the opportunity to vote directly for some issues at the state level. These are in the form of proposed constitutional amendments to the Florida's Constitution. We have 4 to consider this election. These are notorious for being complicated and confusing, backing up polling lines on election day. We have here a publication from the League of Women Voters. I don't know how many of you have seen this. I think we have a stack of them someplace. And I think it's a very good way of getting yourself informed not only of the constitutional amendments, but of a lot of the local candidates. And indeed, there's a website on this one. It's run by the League of Women Voters. It's nonpartisan. That gives you information on a lot of the local candidates. I was looking through them just yesterday. And we can go through some of this because those complicated sort of amendment questions, have you guys heard of these? How many do we have? How many amendments are you voting on this time? Wrong. 4. Yeah, see? We get around to it. Now, part of the problem is a lot of people don't consider these before they go to the polling place, and they read all about this, and they're confused at the time. The line gets longer, and that's not good for anybody. So I figured I could take a few minutes just to talk about the 4 that we have. They're confusing because they're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 5. So it seems like there's 5, but there's not because 4 didn't make the ballot, or actually was previously done. So there's a few different ways that we can directly affect an issue. So these aren't representatives, this is actually putting language in the Florida Constitution. So a few different ways we can put these. 2 have been used this time. Amendments 1 and 2 were done by citizen initiative. So there were petitions throughout the state of Florida. They had to get 8% of the entire population to say, we will consider this ballot question. And if it gets the magic number of 60% now in the state of Florida, it will be added to the Constitution. Amendment 1 has to do with solar energy. You've probably seen a little bit about this one. It was put under the it was proposed by citizens, but it was actually promoted by, because usually you have to have some sort of promotion. It was promoted by various utility companies, looking at how going forward we'll deal with solar power and third-party entities dealing with solar power. Supporters include Duke Energy, Gulf Power, Florida Power and Light, plus 60 plus associations, Tampa Electric Company, and so on. They do a good job of going through this. Opponents are Floridians for Solar Choice, Florida Solar Energy Industries Association, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and kind of strangely, the League of Women Voters has a position on this, which is very rare. I've looked at these pamphlets a lot. This one has some confusing language. We get that little paragraph, but there's a lot more to it. I challenge you to go read a bit more about this, read what we have in front of you, and go a bit further as well. Amendment 2 has been getting a lot of press. It's also a citizen initiative. It has to do with the issue of medical marijuana in the state of Florida. This came up in 2014 and did not reach the threshold of 60%. So it was 57 something. It was very close, but it did not make it. This was promoted by John Morgan, the Orlando lawyer. Morgan and Mormon. Yeah, Morgan and Morgan. Heard of this. The Florida Democratic Party, a few unions, and the NAACP. Opponents include the Florida Chamber of Congress, Drug Free Florida Committee, and the Florida Medical Association. They changed only a little bit from the proposal they had in 2014, and feel free to certainly read through some of the details there. Now, the other two amendments that we have, Amendment 3 and Amendment 5, are related to essentially tax cuts. Allowances in Amendment 3 for disabled first responders not having to pay additional property taxes, and on Amendment 5 looking at homestead exemption for low-income seniors even when the property values go up. These were both put on the ballot by the Florida legislature. 60% of both houses of the Tallahassee legislature, they can put something on. Any of these amendments have gone through the court system and through the Secretary of State's office as well. So this is our chance to directly affect policy. And there are pros and cons, so you want to make sure you understand that as you understand your own positions, your own priorities when you make these decisions. Because it's very difficult to change something once it's on the Florida Constitution. This legislature can't just overrule that. That has a bit more force to it. So pay very close attention. Other sorts of issues we have on the ballot, whether or not we want to remove 3 of the Florida Supreme Court justices. You always see that. It's interesting, there's about 32%, 33% that always say, yes, remove them. It's like, you'll probably see that this time. So you want to look into their character. The 3 that are up there were all appointed by Governor Christ, and there's some detail on the pamphlet as well. So my advice to you, and I'll get to some questions and answers as well, is do not be discouraged. Do not be left in the dark. Do not be tricked by slogans or ads. Know yourself and your positions. Understand what the choices are. Understand what your impact is. Get engaged in the process and do not let negativity and drama keep you from exercising your rightful role in the political process. Do your part for your republic and community. Thank you. And I'll feel free to answer some questions. Let you guys drive the conversation.
Why do the amendments have to be constitutional amendments? Why can't they just be laws that the legislature passes?
So the question is, why do the Florida Constitution amendments have to be amendments and not laws? They don't have to be, but by making them an amendment, especially because you have a different process, for the citizens' initiatives, this is stuff that they didn't even have to ask the legislature for. Constitution is more power, the language of the Constitution is more powerful than any law. You can't use the law to undo the Constitution, but you can use the Constitution to throw out a law. So it gives it a bit more power. So occasionally it happens because, like with these 2, the solar one that we had back in August, the solar one this time, this was something that they felt wasn't being addressed, and so they brought it forward. So, and it's their prerogative to do that, as long as it gets approved through, the language and things like that. Now, the legislature could just make a law about these things, but the next legislature could do away with that law, if that makes sense. Yes? The Electoral College. My students love that. They wrote a whole essay. The Electoral College. So we're a national battlefield state. So from the standpoint of the state of Florida, we do not elect the president. The Electoral College elects the president. Electoral College is made up of electors, people that we are involved in that process, but these people get together in the state capitals and they have a ballot for president and a ballot for vice president. They send their ballots to Washington, D.C., and the president is selected when Congress approves those ballots. Now, the relationship to the states and to the voters is a bit more complicated. So the amount of electors each state gets depends upon their congressional delegation, the amount of congressmen they have, plus the amount of senators. So in the state of Florida, how many electoral votes do we have?
27 or 29.
So how many senators do we have? Two. Very good.
Two.
How many representatives do we have? David, how many? Yeah? No? We have 27. So we have a total of 29 electoral votes.
Got it.
There are states like Wyoming who only has 3 electoral votes, 1 congressman, 2 senators. So we have more power as a state because there are more people in our state. The amount of people relates to the amount of congressional seats you get, not the amount of senators, but Congress. Now, it's not those congressmen or senators that are the electors, it's somebody else. So when we vote, when we go into the polls, either now, early voting, or on November the 8th, we're voting for our preference for where we want Florida's electors to go, which candidate we want them to support. And if you win the popular vote in the state of Florida, you win all 29 electoral votes. And so they have to physically go to Tallahassee 5 weeks from Election Day in December and vote. Now, it's a foregone conclusion. They're bound to what the state of Florida says, but you can have what's called a faithless elector. That does come up. It's not very common. However, that vote would count. They might get arrested afterwards, but that vote could count. It depends upon the state and the state laws. Now, if you win the state for the most part, you win the entire allotment of electoral votes. So Florida is considered a big prize because it could potentially go either way in this election, and we've seen in the past how close it was in 2000, in 2008, and 2012, right? It's been very close in the past few. And so that's why we're getting a lot of attention, because 29 electoral votes out of a total that you need. What's the magic number you need, class?
270.
270 out of the total of 538. So 270 is a majority. Once you reach that, you're elected president. Does that answer your question, Dale? Yes. Other questions?
How do I get to be on the Electoral College?
The electors in the Electoral College, each political party sends a slate. So they'll send a slate to Tallahassee to be approved. There are rules of who can't be an elector. If you're an elected official or under public, you're paid by the public, you cannot be an elector. So random people are electors, but they're not random, they're party faithful, right? But you can apply to become an elector, and then if your candidate wins, you are the ones that go up to Tallahassee for that. There have been problems with that in the past. In the election of 1876, there were times when 2 sets were sent. They're like, wait, which one was the right slate? And Florida was involved in the problems of the 1876 election too. And in 2000, let's hope it doesn't happen again. We don't need that kind of attention.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Why exactly did they require it that 60% of a vote is needed instead of just the majority, like pretty much 50% or more?
Very good question.
Why is it 60
So,
instead of 50?
the state of Florida, we're able to directly apply issues. Now, at the national level, we're never allowed to do that. So the U.S. Constitution is not affected by people's votes. That's never going to happen. But for the Florida one, you're correct. It's moved to 60. Ironically, it was a Florida amendment, constitutional amendment, that we voted on that moved it from 50 to 60. And here's the real irony. It did not get 60. But it passed because it was under the old rules.
Under the old rules.
Yeah. So
I bet a lot of
fun
people
with numbers.
are regretting that decision.
They found that people are much more likely just to vote yes on them and it's not that difficult to get over 50%. So there was a lot of stuff that was sort of just, as long as you got it on there, it was being added. There are constitutional amendments, some of the ones that got a lot of attention, that you couldn't put pregnant pigs in cages. That was a constitutional amendment. It got over 50%. It's in the U.S. It's in the state constitution. So when this sort of thing has happened, they up the threshold. Not every state is that way. Just the state of Florida, to my knowledge, right at this point.
There are some laws that are still on the books that are beyond ridiculous. So why are they? Like, why haven't they been removed? I doubt that that any office, like, I can't remember where it is in Florida, but one of the things is the penalty for horse theft is death by hanging.
Yeah, so you have a lot of laws that are put in, state, local, and municipal laws. So you can't tie a horse to a parking meter in Florida. So you know, just in case. It's up to each legislature. The legislature can do away with a law, and occasionally they do this. The state legislatures got away with certain laws, did away with them, and we have a chance to revisit the Constitution. The Florida Constitution isn't too entirely huge. There are much bigger ones. The state of Alabama is like 1,000 or 2,000 pages long, because any sort of law goes into it. And occasionally they realize there's just a bunch of junk in there. Now, in Florida in 2017, we're going to have a constitutional convention where appointees are going to take a look at the Florida Constitution, and maybe we'll take out things that they would like, and then we would have to then vote on those changes. It still comes back to us. They might make a lot of changes, it might only make a few, but to do away with them, the legislature that made them can do away with them, or some sort of convention at that. The U.S. Constitution, thankfully, doesn't have too much, but you can amend that as well.
It is funny to read about some of these laws, but you're also curious how they got on the books to begin with.
And a lot of times they're not even enforced, so it's not like a cop's looking for horses on parking meters.
How did they get in there?
There's I don't know if you had the pamphlet here. This is a very good one for a start. And you can. What's great is we can look into these individuals, whether they're the statewide ones, which are a bit easier to find out about. You can find out their decisions and things like that. There's very good records for what they've done. Ordinarily, and thankfully, I haven't heard too much about these particular three. There's not a whole lot of controversy there. So, I mean, unless something really blew up and is like they're in the press over and over again, those recalls probably aren't going to happen. But you can look. The Supreme Court of the state of Florida has a website, and it'll have every decision they've made. You can read their opinions, right? All that sort of out there. Plus, the League of Women Voters is pretty good for that, and a number of newspapers have covered those as well. The tougher ones sometimes are the local offices. I moved to Tavares, so I don't know all the politicos there, but the city council, there's 3 seats there. So I'm having to, okay, well, let's learn about these beyond. I saw a sign, there's a person running. It tells me nothing, right? Find out more. I can do a search, go in there. This one does a pretty good job. You can go to their websites themselves, not so much the judges, but the politicians who are running, just to see if their positions line up with what your positions line up to, right? I encourage you not to pick a particular position, but know your own priorities and match it accordingly. Hope that answers your question. Other questions? All right. Feel free, and please come and ask questions over here, because you have some people that can, talk about those candidates. They're going to be biased, which is okay, right? You need to sort of find out about these things and have more pizza if you haven't already done so. I haven't yet, so I will. And I'll answer any other questions if you guys come up to me afterwards. Thank you all for coming.